Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting.
Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we're counting down our picks for the delightfully spooky and ominous Gothic-infused horror and horror-adjacent games for you to sink your teeth into. Before we begin, we publish new content all week long, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Layers of Fear.
In this quiet house, between bookshelves and rows of paintings, lives an artist.
Layers of Fear is a genuinely creepy and terrifying first-person psychological horror game set in a Gothic-soaked Victorian mansion, one dripping with dread around every shadowy nook and cranny. Layers of Fear leans more into the walking sim arena with the occasional environmental puzzle to spice things up a bit. But really, you come to this game for the atmosphere, tension, and perfectly scripted scares. You see, Layers of Fear constantly changes the environment around you as you explore this labyrinthian mansion. What you perceive in front of you may actually shift and warp at any given notice, something that helps the terror continuously feel palpable. In this game, you step into the harrowing shoes of a down-and-out, once-famous artist, one who seeks to paint his magnum opus using any means necessary, something that, unfortunately for his family, leads to some grisly outcomes. The sense of place in this artistically ominous mansion is simply sublime, and will sink its gothic horror hooks into you right from the get-go. Vampire.
So thirsty.
Don't Nod's Vampire truly deserves more attention and praise than it gets. One part vampire RPG, one part survival horror, and another part action-adventure. Vampire weaves a deliciously bloody tale all about Dr. Jonathan Reed, a blood transfusion doctor who just so happens to find himself turned into a creature of the night. Yes, a vampire, much to his dismay. Taking place in the moody, dank and derelict foggy streets of London during the height of the Spanish flu in 1918, Dr. Reed must battle between his need to help his patients and his need for blood as a fledgling vampire. Don't Nod did a truly exceptional job crafting a world brimming with gothic horror vibes in and around the various semi-open London districts that you explore. From dismal hospitals to spooky graveyards to derelict docks to the blood-soaked cobblestone streets, you will feel the gothic terror during the entirety of this meaty adventure. Plus, the game's top-tier writing will ensure you feel the pain when choosing whether to feast on that NPC as a vampire to increase your vampiric strength, which might just close off an entire questline, or sparing them to give London a better chance at overall healing.
We stand upon the precipice. What prevails in the end, I wonder? The desire for blood, or to be of service to man?
Alone in the Dark.
What on earth is happening?
Where am I?
Derceto isn't cursed or blessed. It's a battleground.
2024's reboot of Alone in the Dark might not have set the world on fire, mostly down to a very short runtime, clunky combat encounters, and a general lack of polish. However, what it lacks in these areas, it very much makes up for in sheer Southern Gothic mood and atmosphere. Alone in the Dark tasks you to play as either Detective Edward Carnby or Emily Hartwood as they work together to explore Derceto Manor, hoping to find some answers about Emily's missing uncle, Jeremy Hartwood. Blending traditional gothic horror sensibilities with noir thriller vibes and a healthy dose of Lovecraftian nightmares, Alone in the Dark truly is more than the sum of its often disparate parts. For the best overall experience, be sure to explore Derceto and its incredible, ominous, and varied otherworlds with both Edward Carnby and Emily Hartwood, since both campaigns offer different takes on the plot on top of additional character segments and areas to play through. What makes this game stand out as a highly enjoyable gothic horror game is in the way you weave and navigate your way through Derceto Manor with its elaborate, spooky, and ominous rooms and corridors. Alone in the Dark, despite some gameplay faults, manages to craft a superb sense of place that is not often seen in the horror genre. It really is all about the mood here.
There are some very disturbed figures around here, and I don't think it's just the patients. I've been reading some things about how Dorsetto has a deranging effect on people.
Darkest Dungeon series.
There is a place beneath those ancient ruins in the moor that calls out to the boldest among them.
Now, it would be hard to classify Darkest Dungeon as a pure horror experience, mostly because it's actually an incredibly challenging roguelite RPG. However, to deny this game a place among great Gothic horror games would be a real shame, since, after all, it is utterly dripping with Gothic vibes. Darkest Dungeon is a game about terrifying eldritch abominations, decrepit medieval structures, psychologically scarred and tormented characters, and plenty of permadeath thrown in for good measure. This is just not one of those games that offers much hope to players given just how punishing it can be. Heck, your playable party of varied adventurers can develop mind-breaking traits and afflictions that affect both them and their party members. Darkest Dungeon, as well as its 2023 sequel, both offer meaty and richly rewarding dark horror RPG experiences that are drenched in dread and atmosphere. Plus, the strategic and tactical turn-based battles are finely tuned and meticulously crafted. The rewards, should you survive, are definitely well worth it, and the sense of satisfaction for overcoming the odds is hard to match. Really, don't sleep on either Darkest Dungeon game if for some reason you missed out on these Gothic horror-inspired gems.
The gutters brim with poets, and decency lies burning in the street.
Haunting Ground.
Ah, Fiona. I see you finally awakened.
Capcom had a truly special penchant for creating some memorable and downright terrifying horror games during the 2000s. 2005's Haunting Ground and 2002's Clock Tower 3 are two that really stand out as top-tier third-person survival horror games with immense Gothic horror sensibilities. The former, Haunting Ground, has become a rare PS2 gem, one that will definitely cost you a pretty penny to obtain. In this game, you step into the shoes of Fiona, a young woman who unfortunately finds herself inside a gargantuan Gothic castle after surviving a harrowing car wreck. It's here, in this castle, that Fiona befriends a fluffy doggo friend, Huey. The two are now tasked to explore the castle in the hope of escaping from this nightmare. Now, this won't be an easy task due to the castle's labyrinthian design and layout, and, more pressingly, a hulking brute of a character named Debilitas, who constantly stalks, chases, and torments Fiona, thinking that she is just another one of his dolls. You know, the usual happenings in creepy Gothic-inspired castles, I guess. Fiona doesn't have a way to fight back like in many other survival horror games, which means Haunting Ground is a cat-and-mouse game where you must run, hide, and evade all manner of deadly shenanigans. Now, for a similar experience to this, as mentioned before, look to Clock Tower 3, a game that drips with dread and more intense cat-and-mouse gameplay in and around Gothic horror locations. It's no surprise, really, then that Haunting Ground is considered a spiritual successor to the Clock Tower series. Now, Capcom, please just remake Haunting Ground and also bring back the Clock Tower franchise. Please and thank you. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is a stone-cold stalwart of the Gothic horror subgenre. The fact that this game is still held up in modern gaming times as a fantastic horror-infused vampire RPG truly says so much about the experience, one that was crafted by Troika Games and eventually refined, updated, and iterated upon by fans and modders to make it even more playable and enjoyable with more polish and finesse. Bloodlines takes place in a supernatural-soaked Gothic version of Los Angeles, one where various vampire clans vie for power and status. Being able to develop your very own vampire from the likes of the Brujas, the Toreadors, the Malkavians, the Ventru, the Nosferatu, the Tremere, and the Gangrel is partly what gives this game its gameplay freedom. That, and of course the game's writing and narrative, all based on White Wolf's RPG, namely Vampire the Masquerade. As the name suggests, vampires in this alternate vampire version of LA must uphold the masquerade in order to fit into society alongside humans. Breaking the masquerade leads to disastrous consequences. It's this give and take and tug and pull of the game's overarching narrative and vampire clans that keep things interesting all throughout this robust Gothic horror adventure. Bloodborne. When you first set foot into the sprawling and darkly ominous city of Yharnam, it's clear that you aren't ready for the eldritch aberrations at your doorstep. The atmosphere feels as heavy as a ton of bricks, and it's not helped by the fact that you will likely meet your untimely demise at the claws of a bloodthirsty werewolf right from the get-go, unless, you happen to be good enough to scrape through this fight and come out on top. Good luck. From there, From Software takes you on a punishing roller coaster ride as you try to survive the Lovecraftian onslaught. Yharnam is the epitome of Gothic and Victorian ambiance. As a hunter, it's up to you to slay your way through countless blood-starved baddies and gargantuan monstrosities. Bloodborne almost immediately thrusts its hooks into you with its superb locations, impeccable world building, behind-the-scenes yet enticing narrative, and frenetic bloodlust combat. Many people playing this From Software masterpiece might even get moments where they think of another game from many moons ago, namely Nightmare Creatures. The two, while not directly related, share a very similar vibe, style, and gameplay tendency, so if you wrapped up Bloodborne already, go out and play the PS1 or N64 horror adventure game Nightmare Creatures for even more gothic goodness.
Soon, he will complete his work. Tonight, as the sun sets on London one last time, he will unleash his demonic brood onto the streets.
Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem. It's truly a travesty that Nintendo hasn't found a way to bring back the utterly glorious GameCube-only horror game Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem. Steeped in Gothic horror and Lovecraftian influences, Eternal Darkness is one of those third-person survival horror games that near perfectly blends its gameplay mechanics, storytelling, world design, and scares together into some sort of sanity-breaking smoothie. Sure, not all of the sanity elements in this game, such as the volume changing on the TV, are quite as notable as they once were, but there's no doubting that Alexandra Roivas' time-traveling horror adventure is a masterpiece. At the Roivas estate, a massive Gothic-inspired mansion in Rhode Island, it's up to Alexandra to figure out why her grandfather Edward was murdered. This intriguing familial setup creates a stage for the game to venture out into time-bending historical eras, filled with terrifying monsters and fear-inducing sanity effects, including, but certainly not limited to, your game looking like it's being erased, the character's head magically disappearing, and the screen and environment warping and bleeding. There's just so much variety on offer in Eternal Darkness, from set design to narrative folds to downright freaky music and sound effects, that many of us hope this Nintendo-published mature horror game makes a return one day. Amnesia: The Dark Descent. A true classic and juggernaut of the first-person survival horror space, Amnesia: The Dark Descent became uber popular at the start of the 2010s because of many popular YouTubers and streamers getting the crap scared out of them by this horrifying gothic horror gem from developer Frictional Games. Most indie and AA and some AAA first-person horror games owe a lot of their roots to Amnesia, since it showcased just how immersive and terrifying a psychological horror game can truly be. The standout aspect of this game has to be Castle Brennenburg, the location protagonist Daniel finds himself exploring throughout the course of the game. Daniel's time in this massive gothic castle is the thing of nightmares, especially as the lights go out and he finds himself wrapped up in the snug and cozy blanket of darkness. It's here in the darkness that Daniel, and well, you the player, start to lose your mind, thanks to the way Frictional Games included intense sanity-draining effects.
Alexander produces a knife. He wants me to cut the flesh.
Trying to find tidbits and nuggets of lore while solving countless puzzles while keeping the candles lit, oh, and while running away from freaky humanoid monstrosities are the things nightmares are made of. You never truly feel safe in the confines of Castle Brennenburg, and Daniel may or may not be the trustworthy companion you want him to be. Just try to stay in the light and maybe you'll be okay.
Much of the castle is old and hasn't been tended to for centuries. When the shadow arrives, it won't take long until things start falling apart.
Resident Evil Village. Gothic horror and Resident Evil don't often go hand in hand. Sure, games like Resident Evil 4 have moments of Gothic-inspired goodness, however, it's 2021's Resident Evil Village that completely leans into and immerses players into the robust subgenre of Gothic horror. Once again, playing as Ethan Winters, who returns from RE7, it's up to you to explore the supernaturally infested, snow-laden, European-inspired world of RE Village. From the titular Gothic medieval village itself, to the vampire nest that is Castle Dimitrescu, to the incredibly spooky House of Horrors House Beneviento, and more, RE Village consistently sets the stage for Gothic horror madcaps that will take your breath away. This RE game almost feels like an amusement park for the deranged and derelict, one that Ethan must survive through at all costs. Battling werewolves, vampires, and other creatures of the night, the game is always a surprise. Worry not, there is still some of that RE campiness and goofiness on top of some over-the-top action set pieces. Yes, I'm looking at you, Heisenberg Factory. But make no mistake about it, Village is satisfying, terrifying, and dripping with Gothic goodness that horror hounds will gobble up.
Don't leave. I can't let you.
You're still alive, huh?
So, do you agree with our picks for this list? There are plenty of wonderful Gothic horror and horror adjacent games out there, so be sure to let us know which ones we missed and which are your favorites. Thank you so much for checking out this video from MojoPlays. Be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to stay up to date on all of our daily gaming videos and content right here on MojoPlays.